Hey world, welcome to Dragon Fairy History. I am your host Elijah, and this is my co-host.
Mary.
So today we are discussing elves in the spirit of Christmas and the holidays. But first, we gotta say a fun fact about ourselves. Mary, what's your fun fact?
My fun fact is that my family's going to Puerto Rico for this break.
Wow, Puerto Rico. That's a huge trip. That's really awesome. Well, my fun fact is quite boring. My fun fact is that I've been a really good boy this year, and I think I think I should be on the nice list this year and should be receiving great gifts and not coal.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
So on to the elves we'll be discussing. I'll be discussing the history of elves and how honestly the lore behind elves have changed drastically over time across different cultures. And so it's very interesting how they have come into the Christmas setting. So to start off, um, in the medieval Europe is where we start to see, you know, what we think of elves as. Um, Back then, they were known as youthful, mischievous, small creatures that could sit on a sleeping person and cause nightmares, or create sickness in people and cattle, and they would also steal human children or babies and leave a sickly elf child in its place, kind of like changelings.
Wait, would that
So,
look like the child that they stole?
uh, no, it would be the whole thing is, you leave your child in bassinet, and then while you're asleep, an elf would come in, swap, like steal the baby and put like a sick elf baby there instead, and you would wake up and see that it was your child is gone. So um the lore so the start of elves is very dark and demented. I was very surprised to learn that. So these myths of elves, like evil dark elves, were known as nonfiction. Like they were very much believed in. Like people had traditions to like keep elves away or to avoid elves because like it was actually taken seriously back then. But only recently have elves been considered fictional creatures in Iceland and the British Isles, like very recently. So, like, yeah, very big deal in Europe.
That's pretty crazy.
So elves weren't just in Europe, they were also in Scandinavia. There are different kinds of elves in the Norse mythology. There were light elves and dark elves. Dark elves were like the typical mischievous, causing nightmares, causing sickness, stealing children kind of elves. But light elves were known as like good-hearted elves that were, they were just chill. They didn't really I think they brought good luck, but that's pretty much it. So there's like a distinction there between good and bad elves. Before I move on, do you have any comments or questions about elves so far?
Oh, yeah. So, like, how recently was it that like elves were considered nonfiction? Do you
Probably
know?
like the last century.
Oh, okay. So pretty recent.
Yeah, yeah. Compared to like since the medieval days.
That's pretty crazy how like elves went from like that crazy background to just like Santa's little helpers. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There are also other creatures related to mischief, like pixies and fairies. Fairies are basically elves with wings, and then pixies, I don't know, it's hard. They're all like kind of the same. They come from like the same origin of like little creatures that cause mischief. So you're probably wondering how did elves, become associated with Christmas? Well, um, elves first appeared, wait, not first appeared. What am I saying? Elves just appeared in a Brothers Grimm story called The Elves and the Shoemaker in 1812. This fairy tale is about a poor shoemaker who is visited nightly by elves who help him complete his orders before Christmas. So this is like the first time elves are seen as helping someone with Christmas and being associated with Christmas. And then in Clement Clark Moore's A Visit from St. Nicholas, aka 'Twas the Night Before Christmas story in 1823, Santa himself is described as a jolly old elf. So Santa is an elf in that story.
For elf.
Yeah. In the story called The Christmas Elves, published in 1871, is about magical elves who visit good children during the holiday season. And so, you can see like over the 19th century, elves become more and more associated with Christmas and like being jolly. Yeah. Another popular 19th century publication is what's his name? Godey's Lady's Book, uh, which has featured art depicting Santa and his elves. And several decades later, Norman Rockwell included elves in some of his famous paintings of Santa. So by the 20th century, like elves are like fully cemented in Christmas and Santa and making toys. Any questions or comments on 19th century stuff?
If Santa like was an elf, why is he so much larger than the other elves? What
That's a great question. I mean, to be fair, um, at least in like the media now, elves are like different sizes, can be different sizes, but yeah, usually seen as small. Maybe it's because he's a jolly elf, and that's what makes him big. He's just full of jolly. I think there is a painting somewhere. I've seen a painting of him with pointed ears before.
Yeah, I was
So,
thinking about the pointy ears. Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah. Um, so yeah, in the 20th century, elves are just shown in Christmas media, books and movies, and uh and eventually they became huge in fantasy with, Tolkien's Lord of the Rings kind of started off the whole elves in fantasy, which is just based off like elves from the medieval European myths. And it's just funny how they became like they went from small mischievous creatures to really hot heroes, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so true. There was this like anime that I saw called Delicious in Dungeon, and it featured like elves in it, and it featured them not as like Santa's helpers, but as like magical beings. And it talked about light elves versus like dark elves too. It was kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think of it as dungeon meshy.
Yeah.
Yeah, my roommate's been trying to get me to watch it, which I will eventually. I will eventually get to it.
It's
Just not yet. I'm just a bit too busy right now.
it's fair.
But yeah, so uh now in the 21st century, there's like fantasy elves, which is like the tall, hot, heroic elves. And then there's the Christmas elves that are like the small, jolly Santa's helpers. Well, any more comments or questions?
Nothing here.
Well, I hope you have a very Merry Christmas.
YouTube. So that's all today. We hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And we hope to see you next time. Do you have anything to add?
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.